Look closely at this photograph. You see a bronze mechanism, heavy with green patina, housing dozens of perfectly cut gears. Naturally, your mind dates it to the 18th century, maybe a piece of an old clock. But then I tell you this object is over 2,000 years old. It was forged in an era when humanity still believed the Earth was the center of the universe. This is where cognitive dissonance sets in. Today, you and I are going to unpack this story together. The ancient world has left behind a bizarre collection of objects that look exactly like they were left behind by a careless time traveler. Let us investigate where myth and history finally collide. Gears, valves, batteries, stainless alloys, and even nanoparticles suspended in ancient glass. Archaeologists have pulled all of these out of the dirt, buried in layers dating back thousands of years before our era began. Naturally, conspiracy theorists rush to declare these objects as absolute proof of alien visitors or lost utopian civilizations. Meanwhile, orthodox scientists simply roll their eyes, explaining away the mystery by saying our ancestors were just clever. But I do not believe or deny these claims so hastily. The truth is always stranger than both extremes. We are going to examine ancient artifacts that look suspicious like modern machine parts, existing in a world entirely devoid of electricity, industrial factories, or scientific journals. As we dig deeper into these forgotten layers of truth, we quickly discover that the boundary separating the ancient from the modern is uncomfortably thin. Certain inventions we proudly claim as the crowning achievements of recent centuries were actually perfected thousands of years ago, only to be completely lost when their parent civilizations collapsed into dust. We will begin with a discovery that can confidently be called the most astonishing technical artifact of the ancient world. This is the Antikythera Mechanism. It is widely recognized today as the first analog computer in human history. Meticulously constructed somewhere around the year 150 before our era. The story begins in the year 1901. Greek sponge divers were searching the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea near the tiny island of Antikythera when they stumbled upon a sunken Roman trading ship. They hauled up marble sculptures, amphorae filled with ancient wine, and a few shapeless lumps of heavily corroded bronze. Nobody paid any attention to the metallic rocks until a Greek politician named Spiridon noticed something impossible jutting from the crust. It was a gear wheel. It had perfectly cut triangular teeth, each measuring about 1 millimeter long. Over a century of rigorous research followed, revealing the remains of an incredibly complex mechanical device. Originally housed in a wooden case the size of a modern shoebox, inside that small wooden box sat a minimum of 30 interlocking bronze gears. They were arranged in a highly sophisticated system that remained entirely unmatched in its mechanical complexity until the grand cathedral clocks of the Middle Ages appeared over 1,000 years later by simply turning a crank on the side of the casing. The ancient operator could precisely track the movements of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets across the zodiac constellations. The device could predict both solar and lunar eclipses with stunning accuracy. It displayed the current phase of the moon using a tiny rotating ball painted black and silver, and it even tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. One of the most shocking revelations was the use of epicyclic gearing. This is a system where one gear rotates upon another to model the fundamentally uneven, elliptical movement of the moon. Before this discovery, historians firmly believed that such engineering was a strictly medieval invention. Predictably, fringe authors like Erich von Däniken proclaimed it an alien relic or a surviving machine from Atlantis. But looking at the historical record without leaping to wild conclusions, we find a much more grounded, Yet equally fascinating truth. This machine is the absolute pinnacle of a long, established tradition of Greek mechanics. Even the great Archimedes was known to build similar planetary models, a fact clearly documented by Roman writers. The famous Roman orator Cicero explicitly described an intricate device capable of reproducing the precise movements of the sun, the moon, and the 5 roaming planets with every single revolution. This proves that a rich tradition of complex, highly advanced mechanics thrived in the ancient Greek world for centuries. We simply lost the evidence because bronze was fiercely valuable. These magnificent devices were eventually melted down to forge weapons and mint coins. The Antikythera Mechanism survived only because it sank to the bottom of the sea, safely hidden from the melting pots. It does not prove the existence of extraterrestrial visitors. Rather, it proves we have drastically underestimated the raw intellectual power of ancient engineers. The investigation is far from over. In 2021, a dedicated research team from London, led by Tony Freeth, published a groundbreaking reconstruction of the device's front panel. This section had remained a total mystery for over a century. The scientists hit the ancient bronze with X-ray tomography, so incredibly powerful that the radiation would have been instantly lethal to any living human. Through this process, they deciphered 95% of the microscopic text engraved on the metal plates. They discovered the machine utilized a 462-year cycle for Venus and a 442-year cycle for Saturn. Freeth rightfully called it a genius creation and a true wonder of the ancient world. Yet, the researcher added a crucial point of scientific honesty. The mechanism was surprisingly inaccurate when tracking Mars, missing the mark by up to 38 degrees in certain parts of its orbit. The fault did not lie in the brilliant engineering, but in the flawed Greek theory of planetary movement. They did not understand elliptical orbits, nor did they place the sun at the center of the solar system. The machine was mechanically flawless, but deeply limited by the incorrect worldview upon which it was built. It is a profound lesson for us today. Even the most perfect machine is useless without a truthful model of reality. This brings us to our second artifact, which is equally perplexing, but for an entirely different reason. Enter the Roman dodecahedron. This is a hollow object crafted from bronze or copper alloy, measuring anywhere from 4 to 11 centimeters across. Each of its 12 pentagonal faces features a perfectly round hole of varying diameter, and every single corner is capped with a small, rounded knob, held in the palm of your hand. It looks exactly like a specialized component from some larger, complex industrial machine. It resembles a calibration gauge, a pressure filter, or a mechanical coupling. The first specimen was unearthed back in 1739. Since then, archaeologists have discovered over 130 of them across Europe. Yet, despite centuries of intense study, absolutely nobody knows what they actually do. The academic community has proposed more than 50 different hypotheses to explain these strange geometric objects. Some claim they were surveying instruments, heavy playing dice, or elaborate candlesticks. Others suggest they served as artillery rangefinders, tools for knitting winter gloves, religious talismans, or even simple children's toys. Not a single theory has managed to satisfy the experts, but here is the most chilling detail of all. In a highly bureaucratic Roman civilization that obsessively documented everything from spicy sauce recipes to the strict rules of slave management, there is absolute silence. Not one text, painting, or mosaic mentions them. Every single one has been found in the northern provinces, completely absent from Rome itself. This curious geographic distribution heavily suggests these bizarre metal objects are intrinsically tied to ancient Celtic culture, rather than the mighty Roman Empire itself. The dodecahedron might not be a lost mechanical machine part, no matter how industrial it looks to our modern eyes. Instead, it remains one of the most deeply frustrating, unsolved mysteries of the ancient world. It is a physical object we can hold in our very hands, yet its true purpose remains entirely locked away in the forgotten layers of history. Recently, a popular video creator named Martin Hallett demonstrated how the varying holes could be used to knit different sizes of woolen glove fingers. Millions watched in awe. But cautious historians quickly stepped in to cool the hype. The truth is, there is absolutely zero archaeological evidence that knitting even existed during the Roman era. That specific textile technique did not actually appear until the 10th century at the absolute earliest. Then another piece of the puzzle emerged. In 2023, amateur historians in the English village of Norton Disney unearthed one of the most perfectly preserved dodecahedrons ever found. Crucially, it was buried directly beside a small figurine of a Roman equestrian god. This heavily supports the idea that the object held a deep religious or ritualistic purpose. Yet, it still completely fails to explain why such a widespread, heavily manufactured cultural artifact was never once mentioned by a single Roman writer. Our third artifact takes us deep into the scorching sands of the Middle East, uncovering a controversial object that fundamentally fractured the scientific community. They call it the Baghdad Battery. It is a seemingly ordinary clay jar, standing roughly 13 centimeters tall. Inside, excavators found a hollow copper cylinder and a solid iron rod, securely isolated by a thick plug of ancient asphalt, unearthed in 1936 near an ancient Parthian settlement. The artifact dates back to roughly the 1st century. Its internal construction bears an uncanny, terrifying resemblance to a rudimentary galvanic cell. If you fill this jar with a mild acid like vinegar or fermented grape juice, it will genuinely generate about 1 volt of electricity. Stick with me, this is where the investigation gets highly contentious. The radical hypothesis that this was an ancient electrical battery was first proposed by a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig in 1940. Numerous laboratory experiments swiftly confirmed that the ancient device could indeed generate a measurable electrical current. Conspiracy theorists predictably seized upon this revelation with blind enthusiasm. They loudly proclaimed that the ancients used electricity to illuminate the dark corridors of the Egyptian pyramids, electroplate golden artifacts, and perhaps even power entire lost cities. But as we investigate the forgotten layers of truth, we must remain grounded. No wires, no glass bulbs, and no electroplating vats have ever been found. We must also acknowledge some highly inconvenient historical facts. These peculiar clay vessels are virtually identical to known scroll storage containers discovered in the neighboring ancient city of Seleucia. They share the exact same proportions and physical design, just without the internal copper tubing. Furthermore, the thick iron rod inside the cylinder is heavily corroded in a way that suggests a slow, accidental chemical reaction, rather than a deliberate, sustained electrical circuit. The most sober, logical conclusion is that we are looking at a simple storage vessel where random metallic elements were stashed and forgotten. The famous electric charge is likely just a freak chemical accident. However, a fascinating middle ground does exist. Let us look closely at the physical evidence left behind in the dust. Some researchers argue these ancient vessels were used for electroplating, a way to coat objects with a microscopically thin layer of silver or gold. And when you examine certain pieces of Parthian jewelry, you do find a suspiciously perfect even coating that traditional gilding cannot easily explain. But here is where we must pause and not jump to conclusions. This theory remains entirely speculative. Modern experiments have shown that a current of 1 or 2 volts is simply not enough for high-quality electroplatin G without additional equipment that has never been found in the sands of Iraq. The most crucial detail to grasp is this: even if the Baghdad Battery actually produced an electrical current, it does not mean these ancient people understood electricity the way we do today. Today, you and I are going to unpack this mystery together, walking the line between myth and science. It is entirely possible the Parthians harnessed a raw electrochemical effect for one specific task. Completely blind to the underlying physics, think of a traveler using a compass without grasping electromagnetic fields. Yet, the final verdict remains locked away. Following the tragic looting of the Iraqi Museum in 2003, access to the artifact vanished before modern testing could be completed. The trail goes cold, but our investigation into the forgotten layers of Earth continues. The fourth artifact is something that makes modern physicists shake their heads in absolute disbelief. We call it the Lycurgus Cup. It is a Roman glass chalice from the 2nd century, and it changes color depending on how the light strikes it. Picture holding this ancient chalice in your hands. When the light reflects off its surface, the glass appears a milky, pale green, as solid and opaque as carved jade. But the moment you place a light source directly behind it, the entire cup flares up into a brilliant, fiery red, glowing like a flawless ruby. This is not a trick of the eye. It is not a clever layer of paint. It is something known as dichroic glass. Its ancient secret stayed buried until 1990, when researchers at the British Museum finally placed a tiny fragment under a scanning electron microscope. What they found shattered our assumptions about Roman technology. The glass matrix was deliberately packed with nanoparticles of gold and silver. It is the precise interaction between these microscopic metals and shifting light waves that creates the stunning illusion. Let us put that measurement into perspective. 50 nanometers is about 1,000 times thinner than a single strand of human hair. Modern science only figured out how to manipulate materials at this scale within the last few decades, relying on massive laboratories, vacuum deposition, and laser ablation. Yet Roman glassblowers in the 4th century achieved the exact same result with their bare hands. How did they do it? The truth is likely rooted in a brilliant accident. By tossing the finest sweepings of gold and silver dust into molten vats, an unknown master stumbled upon a visual miracle. They had no idea what a nanoparticle was, nor could they explain the physics, but they meticulously memorized the recipe. It was not calculated nanotechnology. It was an empirical spell passed down in the dark. The exact same physical principle that makes the Lycurgus Cup glow is currently being used in 21st century medical diagnostics and high-tech optical sensors. Naturally, conspiracy theorists point to this chalice as absolute proof of a lost, hyper-advanced civilization. But as we sift through the forgotten layers of our history, the real answer reveals something far more fascinating. It proves that human intuition and practice can outpace theoretical science by 1,600 years. The chalice remains the only fully intact piece of ancient dichroic glass ever found. Its surface features an intricate relief of the Thracian king Lycurgus, violently entangled in a web of grapevines. This specific mythological scene firmly anchors the masterpiece to the 4th century, a time when such dark, dramatic legends dominated Roman decorative arts. Today, the cup rests quietly behind climate-controlled glass in the British Museum, arguably the most mind-bending artifact in their entire collection. But its story did not end in antiquity. researchers at the University of Illinois recently realized that this ancient combination of glass and silver nanoparticle functions as an incredibly sensitive chemical sensor. Merely changing the type of liquid inside the vessel alters the color of the glass. Today, that exact Roman mechanism is being adapted for rapid disease diagnosis in modern hospitals. An ancient artisan's lucky mistake has literally become the foundation for life-saving technology. But let us leave the Roman Empire behind and travel east. Our fifth artifact stands tall in the sweltering center of Delhi. It is something you can walk right up to and touch if you ever visit India. Looming over the Qutb Minar complex is a towering column of metal known simply as the Iron Pillar. It stands over 7 meters tall, weighing roughly 6 tons, and it is forged from virtually pure wrought iron. Deeply carved into its cold surface is a Sanskrit inscription tracing its origins to the reign of Emperor Chandragupta II, placing its birth around the year 402. That makes this massive iron monument over 1,600 years old. Here is where the mystery deepens. In the punishing climate of Delhi, with its relentless monsoon rains, blistering heat, and suffocating humidity, a normal piece of iron would be devoured by rust in a matter of months. Yet this colossal pillar has endured 16 violent centuries of weather, standing there looking as immaculate as the day the forge fires finally cooled. You and I have heard the wild theories 1,000 times before. People look at this unyielding metal and immediately claim it is the handiwork of ancient aliens or the fading echo of some technologically supreme pre-flood civilization. How else could ancient Indian smiths manufacture stainless steel 1,500 years before modern industry claimed the patent? The truth, uncovered by dedicated metallurgists, is beautifully elegant. The craftsmen forged the massive pillar by hammering together glowing lumps of iron extracted through low-temperature charcoal smelting. During this brutal, rhythmic pounding, phosphorus from the raw ore mixed with the slag. This specific chemical marriage birthed a microscopic shield across the metals. Surface, a crystalline layer of iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate, known today as mesowite. This invisible mesowite skin acts as an impenetrable shield, a natural anti-corrosion barrier that aggressively blocks moisture from chewing into the raw iron. Now, if you look closely at the very base of the pillar where it meets the damp earth, you will spot a few humble flakes of rust. It is not entirely immortal, but everywhere above the soil. That chemical armor preserves the monument in a state of suspended animation. Those ancient Indian metallurgists did not secretly invent modern stainless steel. Instead, they masterfully engineered an environment where the iron effectively learned to protect itself. They likely had no concept of the molecular chemistry at play. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound engineering triumphs are born from sweat, fire, and a bit of luck, and remarkably, this pillar is not alone. Scattered across the vast landscape of India are several other enormous iron columns from the exact same era. And every single one of them shares this anomalous, baffling immunity to the elements. This changes the narrative entirely. It proves these ancient blacksmiths were reproducing the miracle on demand, even without a formal periodic table to guide them. They controlled the chemical makeup of their ore, the heat of their furnaces, and the rhythm of their hammers with terrifying precision. This was no random fluke. It was pure, unadulterated mastery, hidden inside a strict religious and artisanal tradition rather than a modern textbook. Which brings us to our sixth and final artifact. It might look like the most modest object on our list, but it's absolute. Mind-numbing ordinariness makes it the most unsettling of all, hidden among the tragic ruins of Pompeii. Excavators pulled a bronze water valve from the volcanic ash. It is an everyday, ordinary plumbing fixture, complete with a tapered cone mechanism, a rotating handle, and threaded fittings meant to tightly grip a water pipe if you were to somehow scrub away the thick green patina and the ghostly residue of Mount Vesuvius. You would swear this piece was freshly purchased from a local hardware store. The Romans commanded a staggering network of aqueducts, and to control that rushing water, they utilized bronze valves functionally identical to the ones sitting under your kitchen sink right now. The internal mechanism relies on a heavy, machined cone that instantly cuts the water flow when twisted. It is the exact same fundamental engineering found in our modern industrial ball valves. Roman plumbers intimately understood how to hermetically seal pipe joints, how to eliminate crippling water leaks, and how to artificially regulate massive hydrostatic pressure. They possessed a strictly standardized inventory of lead pipes, heavy bronze stopcocks, and complex distribution hubs feeding public baths, fountains, and private estates. The mighty city of Rome alone was nourished by 11 massive aqueducts, stretching over 400 kilometers in total, every single day. These stone arteries pumped roughly 1 million cubic meters of fresh water into the capital. The flow was carefully divided through a sprawling labyrinth of heavy lead pipes called fistulae. Each pipe featured a strictly standardized diameter and proudly bore the stamped name of its manufacturer, just like modern industrial supply lines. At every major intersection in that subterranean maze, the Romans installed these heavy bronze valves. Again, devices entirely indistinguishable from the modern plumbing you and I rely on every day. These brilliant engineers even invented the one-way check valve, a crucial mechanism that forces water to travel in only a single direction. They deployed them inside heavy mechanical pumps designed to fight roaring city fires. It is the exact same technology keeping our modern heating systems alive. Now, a dusty plumbing fixture is never going to make the front cover of a sensational book about ancient mysteries. It is far too mundane. It is far too easy to understand. It looks exactly like the metal pipes hiding behind your drywall. Yet, that unglamorous familiarity is exactly where its true greatness lies. Think about this carefully. The famous Antikythera Mechanism shatters our understanding of history because it is a solitary, impossible ghost. But the Pompeii water valve is terrifying for the exact opposite reason. It is merely one of tens of thousands. The Roman war machine was actively mass-producing industrial components. Centuries before the Industrial Revolution began, they took advanced hydraulic physics, weaponized it into standard infrastructure, and hydrated a million citizens. But when the great empire finally fractured, Europe forgot what indoor plumbing was for 1,000 dark years. Medieval cities literally drowned in their own filth, while beneath the soil, brilliant bronze valves sat rotting in silence. This is not the story of some lost alien technology. It is the tragedy of a lost engineering culture. The distinction between those two ideas is absolutely massive. When we whisper about forgotten ancient knowledge, we are not talking about some mystical vanishing act. It is a violently mundane process. The master craftsmen died before they could teach their apprentices. Busy workshops were burned to the dirt. Vast supply chains snapped, and the wealthy governments that funded the blueprints simply collapsed into dust. That tarnished bronze valve from Pompeii is not a supernatural puzzle. It is a grim, physical warning about the terrifying fragility of human civilization. We have examined 6 artifacts today, 6 forgotten layers of truth proving our ancestors were vastly more inventive than the history books claim. We saw the Antikythera Mechanism, packed with 30 interlocking gears silently predicting cosmic eclipses. We investigated the Roman dodecahedron, a geometric phantom whose true purpose has ruthlessly mocked scholars for 3 centuries. We weighed the Baghdad Battery, which might just be a humble jar. Or perhaps the dawn of forgotten electricity. We marveled at the Lycurgus Cup, manipulating light with microscopic gold. We stood before the immortal iron pillar of Delhi, laughing at 16 centuries of monsoon rains. And we uncovered a Pompeian water valve that would thread perfectly into your own modern bathroom. Not a single one of these relics requires a ghost, a wizard, or a visitor from the stars to explain its existence. Each one is the brilliant, desperate, and beautiful product of the human mind, surviving and inventing in a world we are far too quick to dismiss as primitive. The truth is always waiting right beneath our feet. Ancient masters did not rely on complex theories. They possessed something far more grounded, thousands of hours of quiet, relentless practice. They never grasped the exact chemistry of their recipes, but they knew the results were real. This unspoken truth passed from master to apprentice, perfected over centuries. Yet, when that fragile chain snapped, broken by war, plague, or a falling empire, the knowledge vanished forever. The true lesson of these artifacts is deeply philosophical. Progress is never a straight line. Science and myth blur when technology is forgotten. A mighty civilization that built the Colosseum can crumble into dust, leaving the next generation to spend centuries desperately trying to recreate what the ancients considered completely ordinary. Today, you and I tend to believe that humanity only moves forward. We like to think each generation is smarter than the last, convinced that our modern smartphones and towering rockets guarantee we will never slide back into the dark ages. But these 6 mysterious objects tell a very different story. The greatest defense against losing our collective mind is not built of stone walls or standing armies. It is the simple act of writing, sharing, and teaching. Romans built magnificent aqueducts but left no engineering manuals. Greek thinkers assembled the genius Antikythera Mechanism only to let the design die. Indian blacksmiths forged rust-proof iron, yet never wrote down the formula. Anything left unrecorded is merely waiting to be swallowed by the shifting sands of time. So, when an explorer digs up a strange metal shard 1,000 years later, they are quick to call it a miracle. They invent wild myths to explain what they cannot comprehend. But the cold truth is far more haunting. It is not a miracle at all. It is simply a fragmented piece of an ordinary Tuesday from a forgotten civilization, a society that built wonders but failed to save itself. I want to know what you think. Tell me in the comments which of these ancient anomalies challenged your beliefs the most. And make sure to subscribe to this channel. We are just scratching the surface here. There are countless more stories waiting to be unearthed, tales of impossible artifacts that absolutely should not have existed, yet undeniably did. Until we meet again, keep your eyes open.